before we go back to that practice, looking for me, the person that seems to be here, just a few comments. There are a number of common experiences we have when we begin this practice. One common experience, of course, is we're not able to do the search well. We get confused, we can't see very clearly, we get lost. And of course, that's because our focus is not very sharp and clear. So therefore we need to work more on our Shamatha practice. And then the more focused and clear our mind is, the better or easier it will be to investigate. Again, going back to that analogy of a scientist who's running an experiment, if their equipment is faulty, then the experiment's not really going to come up with any sort of answers. It's going to generate all sorts of different results. So similarly, if our mind is not very sharp and clear and focused, then we can come up with all sorts of different things and a lot of confusion and so forth. So therefore, the more effort we put into the Shamatha practice, the more we can make our mind more focused and clear. You'll find the Vipashyana practice will work better. Does that mean we have to abandon Vipashyana practice altogether and only do Shamatha practice now? I think that would also be a little bit extreme. But rather, if we find that our ability to focus is quite poor, we need to emphasize Shamatha now, but still start to do a little bit of Vipashyana, because we still can, with a partially operating equipment, we can still get some little taste, and any little taste will help the Shamatha practice as well, so they'll feed each other. A second common experience we often have when we begin this practice is sometimes people turn this into an intellectual exercise. And then rather than actually being an empirical scientist and just looking, then of course the intellectual mind will always come up with an answer, and it'll be based on whatever our belief system is. You know, for example, we may be sort of doing the search and not really finding much, but then the intellectual mind goes, well, I know the answer, I'm the soul, because that's what I believe. Or if we've studied some Buddhism, the intellectual mind will come and say, well, I'm just a subtle mental continuum, because that's what's going from life to life. Or if we've studied some more New Age philosophies where it's said that everything is just subtle energy, subtle vibration, the intellectual mind will come up and say, well, I'm subtle energy, I'm subtle vibration, because that's what I see, so that's got to be me. But then we're not doing the experiment, we're just letting the intellectual mind sort of say who we think we are. So therefore, we need to give the intellectual mind a holiday when we're doing this practice and just look and see what we find, if anything. And then a third main or common experience when we do this practice is a lot of fear arising. I think I mentioned this already, is that generally if there's fear arising in this practice, it's usually a good sign. It usually means we are doing the investigation well, and we're coming to see that the me is not, we can't really find that me. And then of course what's happening is we're misinterpreting that as there's no me at all. Because now we are stuck in the two extremes. The two extremes are existence and non-existence. And existence, of course, is grasping onto things existing independently. So that's generally where we're stuck now. And when we come to look for this supposed independent me that seems to be here and we don't really find, then we wrongly assume that I don't exist, because for us now there just seems to be two possibilities. Either there is a real independent me, real independent world, or there's no me and no world, because we've never seen it in any other way. So it seems like we are negating existence itself. But of course, we're not. And to help with that fear, we can simply ask, who's having the fear? Because if you don't exist, there can be no fear. So the fact that fear is arising proves that you exist. And of course, the answer is, of course, to understand that not finding doesn't mean no me, it just means no independent me. And so therefore, if we have understood the view of emptiness, we'll understand that the flip side of emptiness is dependent arising, which means not finding is actually meaning there is a dependent me. And so if we appreciate that, then you will find that fear won't arise. In fact, you may have a lot of joy arising. Because we'll come to realise the me that I've identified with my entire life, the one that's caused so much mental afflictions and suffering, simply doesn't exist. I'll be very happy about that. In fact, if we think about it, it's a bit crazy. A non-existent, something that never has existed, cannot exist, will never exist, is the root of all of our suffering. It's only because we believe it exists we suffer. And so, therefore, if we can improve our view of emptiness, then instead of fear, you will probably have a lot of joy arising. Because you'll see that doesn't exist, that independent me. And therefore, I can really start to overcome my mental afflictions and suffering. And so you'll be very happy about that.
Never mind.
Can you please explain again what is dependent? Like, dependent me, how does it look?
That's what I'm going to talk about after the meditation. I'm going to unpack that more.
Okay, but generally, what does it mean when...
Well, it's like everything, depends on causes and conditions, parts and labelling.
Why does that reduce our attachment to it if it's dependent? I mean, labeling, yes, but why does the fact that it's from cause and condition reduces my attachment to it as well?
Because if we understand that causes and conditions really means labelling. I mean, if we superficially understand cause and condition, it won't change anything. I think we all superficially understand cause and conditions, don't we? Don't we?
Let's say you do experientially, understand that things come from...
Because then causality, you will see that nothing exists objectively. There's no thing there. If you really experientially realise causality, you'll know it's not like one thing causing another thing, it's just this flow. And so then there's no objective thing there, which means there's no objective beauty there, which means what's to get attached to.
So I think it's the same question from yesterday, and you already answered that, but I apparently didn't understand the answer. I don't understand why, if there's a flow, that means things change. Why does that imply? Why does causality imply labor?
Well, if we, like I said, if we understand causality at the deepest level, because if we have a thing, an objective thing existing, and existence, of course, only happens through time. Well, you can't talk about existence with zero time. So if we're having something existing for even a brief moment, doesn't that imply for that brief moment that thing is not changing? Doesn't it? If there's a thing there objectively.
Not really.
not.
Yeah, if we look at time as a number, then.
No, but I mean it's duration. I mean, no matter how short that is, if you say there's an objective thing there, you're saying that during that brief moment it's not changing, which means it's not impermanent.
No, let's look at a clock. Is there a measure in which it's not changing? It's all like time is always changing, but it doesn't mean there is no time.
So therefore there's no objective second or minute, is there?
One objective second? One objective?
It's objective? Or isn't second a concept that we've developed to measure something, measure duration?
All I'm saying is that thing can change and still exist. In my point of view. I don't understand why.
Yeah, we're not saying yes, they exist, but not objectively.
Yes, I don't. Maybe it's my problem, but I don't understand why. I don't understand why.
Right, well, okay, there's a cup existing objectively.
Yeah, but the cup can change still. It can, like, if you stop time.
Yeah, but you say it. But stop, then there's nothing exists if you stop time. You can't have zero time, then there's no existence. Because existence only is within time, no? Isn't it? Isn't it? I mean, how can you talk about existence with zero time? I mean, it doesn't make sense, does it? Zero time. No?
I think it does. But
It does?
It depends on the definition.
No, I'm talking zero time, not small
Yeah, I
time.
understand.
Zero. You have to think about that, because that's important. If you can really appreciate that, then I think the other things can make sense.
We'll try.
In this meditation, in the previous ones about finding the self, always comes to me the matrix problem, I call it. Because,
Matrix problem.
yeah, because I keep telling myself, okay, the me is not in my body, it's not in my mind, so it's different from the body. Okay, so where is it? Is it in this building? No, of course. But then I start to think maybe I can't find the me because it's something weird, and I can't really explain that as a. But
Yeah, but
if I was a program, or I was a part or attached to a computer somewhere.
yeah, but we're not looking for some obscure thing that we never seen. We're looking for the me that is there every moment of our life.
So you mean that I can still be hooked up to some machine, but obtain enlightenment because I realize that the me I'm grasping on is not real? That's what you're saying?
But see, we're talking about how we exist,
Oh, yeah.
not what exists. There are many things we'll never know exist or not. What exists, what's off in some distant galaxy or something, but that's of no relevance.
Mm-hmm.
What is relevant here is seeing reality as it is, not seeing all of reality, seeing everything that exists. That's not important.
Okay.
The thing is, how do we exist? That's the question, because that's where we get it wrong. And so we're looking for the me that is there, or seems to be there, all the time. So we're not looking for some hypothetical something maybe somewhere else, because we're not identifying with that when we're getting angry or whatever. We're identifying with the me that seems to be here.
Yeah.
That's what we need to look for.
It's just that it's very nice and interesting to think of things as impermanent and independent and all that, empty and all that thing. Okay, you are telling me that this is something that is the truth, and that I should.
Yeah, but you don't believe me because I tell you.
Okay, but then I think maybe it's not true. Yeah, if it could be true.
And if we leave it as an intellectual exercise, we can go round and round and round for the rest of our life, and nothing will change.
But if it's wrong, maybe this is all just maybe it's all just nonsense, and there is a me, an objective me that is hooked up to a computer somewhere, and this is something I would like to know.
And the Buddha's assertion is, if we look, we will find, we'll see. But again, if you just use that intellectual knowledge, an intellectual way of thinking, then you'll just go round and round and round and you'll never discover anything.
Okay.
So the Buddhist answer is, look. And of course, it's not just some intellectual exercise. It's not some sort of stimulation thing. The whole purpose is to overcome mental afflictions and suffering.
Yeah. But if my mental afflictions come from the fact that I'm not in control of my own self, because I'm being used as a battery for some evil machine, then this is what.
But this is basing on the hypothesis that we are material. That the me is material, isn't it?
For all that I know, yes.
Yeah. I mean, how else would you talk about hooked up to a machine or something?
Yeah. Okay.
So the Buddhist assertion is that matter is not fundamental, and we can directly discover that in meditation.
Which also becomes something that the machine made up, so for us to
But again, as long as we leave it as an intellectual exercise, yes, we can have all these sort of mind games and arguments, and we'll go round and round, and everyone will have a good opinion, and it sounds reasonable, and no answers will come. And that's why we have hundreds of different philosophies in the modern world. Many of them sound very plausible, but there's no way of testing them. No way of testing them. So yes, we can have a theory that, yes, I'm really something hooked up in a machine like the Matrix. Sure, that could sound reasonable, plausible, but how do we test that?
Well, I don't know, but...
Well, that's it. So Buddhism says, this is our theory, or the Buddha said, this is his theory, this is how you test it.
Okay, so this is a way to prove or disprove one theory, which I have to invest a lot of...
Well, it's not about theories, it's about seeing reality.
Yeah, of course, but for me, I'm not there yet.
Right, sure, of course. And so if we feel like that this theory sounds reasonable and it seems like it could really bring something for me in terms of reducing my mental afflictions and suffering, then why not investigate? I mean, of course, if it sounds like a load of rubbish and you think it won't help, then of course forget it and go somewhere else. Don't waste your time. No, we've not got that much time and we want to maybe improve our life and so forth. So if we find something that seems like reasonable and it seems like it might actually help us, let's invest our time there. Otherwise, if we don't, and we just do a bit of dabbling everywhere, then we'll have all these nice ideas of who we think we might be, but then we'll never investigate any of them.
So maybe my question is, what would you suggest me to do if this kind of thought, intellectual thought, arises through Vipashyana? What should how should I satisfy myself but still be able to pursue this path of understanding reality the way that the Buddha taught?
By understanding that this sort of practice will either confirm or refute or deny what these other ideas that you have.
I felt like a tree. Like
A tree.
like a part of nature. Like grass or like everything is dissolved, something like that. And it was nice. I'm just thinking, how can a person live like that? Like if I'm doing a lot of Vipashyana,
Yeah.
of emptiness,
Right.
and
How does a person live like that?
it's like
It
part
means
of
that if
nature. How can you take care of yourself? Because you can forget to eat. You can forget.
No, you won't. Because you will understand that suffering is arising, whether it's here or there, same, let's deal with it. And if I don't eat, I'm not going to be able to do that. Because the nature of emptiness is compassion. So compassion is what's driving us. If we're in this valid experience, compassion is what's driving. So you would not do anything to harm the body, because that would be opposite to compassion.
And then so you need not to harm the body. you need food, you need money, so the
Correct.
question arises.
So you would do whatever you need in an ethical way to do that.
Okay.
I think I'm a little bit a lot confused about the me, qualities and character.
Qualities and character.
Qualities and character. Because
Sure.
isn't that like mental afflictions are our qualities and character?
Sure.
And
We have those qualities and characters, yeah. We
are
have mental
any
afflictions.
Mental afflictions.
Sorry?
Is mental afflictions our character or qualities like personality?
Well, personality, of course, is just a concept that we've developed that is basically is describing a collection of certain traits. We call that personality.
So traits are mental afflictions.
We can have positive traits and negative traits.
Yeah, and so I wanted to ask also about that. So assuming not all of my mental afflictions cause me to suffer.
Well, if you call suffering dukkha, yes. If you call suffering unpleasant, no. Remember, in that 6-stage process, suffering doesn't just mean unpleasant, it's all of our experiences. So can you, with attachment, do something generous? Of course.
No, let's say that I have a positive opinion. Let's say I'm an optimistic person. Like, it's a positive trait for me, okay? To be optimistic person. How is that making me suffer? Like, maybe it's a mental affliction.
But again, suffer doesn't mean unpleasant, painful. It means all of our experiences. Remember, suffering here in that diagram is dukkha. So that includes our pleasant, unpleasant and neutral experiences.
But I'm not attached to this idea. It's just there.
Good, and therefore you won't generate harmful behaviour. Very good. But you're still going to have an experience within this life, aren't you?
Experiencing.
Well, maybe a good result. Let's say you're generous, then you'll experience receiving something. That's dukkha. Because it's still wrapped up in ignorance. So suffering here doesn't mean whatever we do, we're going to have something unpleasant happen to us. That is not dukkha.
Okay, so, and another question is, when I'm looking for the me, like we did the last meditation, so if I understand correctly, it's more to look at qualities, at character. Like I was trying to picture a situation when I got praised about something that I did, and to imagine how I felt about myself. Or maybe I got so confused. I don't know.
So, in this Vipashyana practice, we can look for anything. We can look for me, we can look for the body, which we're going to do later today. We can look for the mind or awareness, we're going to do that tomorrow. We can look for the cup, we can look for a quality, we can look for anything. So whatever we're searching for, that's what we need to look for, and not then look for the me and say, well, there's all these qualities here, or there's an awareness here or something. Then we're sort of doing another practice, we're doing something else. Then all we're doing is a practice of understanding what sort of qualities I have, but that's not a Vipashyana practice of emptiness.
So maybe you said to the me that we're grasping to is a kind of like collection of qualities. Right?
No, it doesn't seem like that at all, does it?
I don't know. So
the one we're grasping to seems to be completely independent of everything, doesn't it? Intellectually, we understand I have qualities, I have a body, I have a mind, but the me we grasp to instinctively seems to be something very independent of everything.
Like we think I am the quality instead of I have a quality?
As well. I mean, this is something I'm going to talk about after the meditation now. But the me, as we saw yesterday, is something just labelled on the basis of the body and the mind. And depending on the situation, what we label me on changes all the time. I mean, if we have a lot of pain, aches and pain in the body, we say, oh, I'm hurt. There we're labelling me on the basis of the body. if there's anger coming up in the mind, and I say I'm angry, we're labelling me on the anger. I mean, we can label me on any part of the body and the mind. But the problem is, we don't realise the me is something merely labelled on this basis. We're grasping to a me existing from its own side, not as something merely labelled on characteristics or qualities or the body or whatever.
Okay, so maybe if you can explain again the first point there, identifying the target, because maybe that was my problem.
Yeah, so we are, in the first one, we're not trying to determine all the things that make up me. You know, that I've got this body, I have anger, I have jealousy, I've got this quality, I've got this characteristic. That's a conventional idea of what makes up us. We have a certain height, we have certain characteristics, we have that. That is irrelevant here in this context. We're not looking at what sorts of things we have, but how we exist. How we exist as a person. And now it seems like me exists completely independent of everything else. That's the first step, is to get
to look at the way we think we exist independently.
Experientially, not intellectually, experientially, how I see myself experientially. There seems to be really an independent me here. And then just become familiar with that me that we're identifying with. And then look for that me. That's it. So in this practice, we're not interested in what qualities we have, whether we've got a tall body, or whether we have mental afflictions, or whether we have a lot of generosity. That's irrelevant in this practice. We're just looking for the me that seems to be here.
Maybe because of the praise. Because of
What happened to me, I was lucky. I just asked you before something about my experience, and I don't want to talk about it. And you answered me like later, and then I had a strong feeling of this me that. And then I was looking, I was lucky, and I was looking for that me. Like, where is this me that you, in a way, you pushed it, and so I felt like offended a little bit, you know. Me was offended, and I was looking for this me. And I was lucky, it was 1 second before we started. And I was looking for this me.
Very good. So let's have another look. Let's look again.
What is funny?
So we need to keep looking. Not just run this experiment once or twice, we need to keep running it many, many times. So let's run it again.
Maybe say something not nice.